I'm Jade McNeil and welcome to the BEESPACE Podcast, your bi-weekly dose of business and property realness. No hype, no fluff, and definitely no BS. Just honest conversations about what it really takes to build something from nothing. Hello, welcome to the BEESPACE Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be specifically talking around what happens when you make the decision to transition from doing what we commonly refer to in the industry as vanilla buy-to-lets into HMOs, and kind of, if you're at that stage and you think that that might be on the cards for you, kind of what are my top considerations that I think you should be looking at before you make the leap. So a great place to start with this is my own experience of doing this. So I am that classic person, and you know, if you've listened to my story episode right at the start of the pod, and I kind of go through kind of how I've built my portfolio from the very start to where I am now. So I am that person that, you know, started off very slowly, living in renovations, then moved on to a couple of flips, then built up a cash pot, went into buy-to-lets, and soon realised that this money isn't going to go very far and I'm not actually going to make a significant return from it. So yeah, that was around the time when it was kind of, you know, a conversation for many reasons in our home of how do we make our money work better for us. And somebody sort of in and around property related kind of, you know, circles said to me, oh, you know, what about HMOs? And I'm like, absolutely no way. They scare the hell out of me. People that own HMOs are rogue. They all go to prison. They don't look after the tenants. Like, no thanks. I don't want that. That sounds like a lot of hard work. Fast forward all these years later, and here I am. And I've got a fully HMO portfolio consisting of students and professionals, and I live and breathe them, and that's what I do. You know, anyone that works with me probably comes to me because they want to build out a HMO portfolio. So yeah, I often think about myself in that stage and think, gosh, that was a bit of a U-turn. So, you know, one of my factors for making the shift, like I said, was really around financials and kind of wanting to make money work harder. But also it was the time when I structured my first joint venture. Didn't meet my first joint venture partner, because my first joint venture partner was a family member, who it often is, who had kind of watched us build, flip, live in these houses and stuff, and, you know, build up that cash pot over the years and wanted a piece of the action. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this right now, but, you know, our kind of scenario with that JV partner is a 50-50 profit split. They put the money in and then we split the profit 50-50. So this is basically what really pushed us into the HMOs, is because we needed to make more money to make the whole thing make more sense for both sides. So it really was a case of, well, maybe we should give this a go, because as I'm reading online, like, you're making more because you've got more tenants living in your buildings, which high level is, you know, absolutely true. But, you know, there's lots of considerations now to take into the mix that didn't necessarily have such a factor back in 2016, 2017 when I started doing HMOs. So I'm talking about like interest rates and blah, blah, blah. I won't go into too much about that. We have enough of that doom and gloom everywhere, don't we? But yes, things were slightly different then than they are now. So in a nutshell, when I started out in HMOs, I had an investment pot and I did my research online, and I kind of put my finger in the air, guys, and went, I'm gonna have a stab at this. And genuinely, my approach was, if I go to a pretty okay area and I buy the worst house on the best street, it'll be all right. Like, it should work out. So on the same day, I went and viewed a load of houses and I put 2 offers in, and both the offers were accepted. Sounds great, right? Like, in these times when it's really hard to make a deal stack and get offers accepted, you think, what, 2 on one day? Amazing. Yeah, it was great. It was great, until I soon realised, by the time I've paid deposits and stamp duty, I'm only going to be able to have 1 in renovation. So basically, on my first few proper HMO deals, I gazumped myself, and I didn't kind of cash flow forecast the way I would now, and I had to have one sat there while the other one was being worked on, and had to wait for a refinance. So yeah, first tip is, understand cash flow and understand what's achievable with what you've got in the bank. Anyway, we made it through, we did it. It's just that I learned the hard way about that, and yeah, we survived the storm, but I wouldn't do that again, because especially when you've got a joint venture partner and you're kind of, I was running the projects and stuff back then, and it's kind of like having to explain, second one's not being done because I've kind of like not thought about not having enough cash available, but we got there in the end, and that really is all that matters. So anyway, thinking about now, and with all my experience under my belt, how, and when I'm, for example, working with one of my mentees, helping them build out their portfolio from scratch, what am I saying? Like, what advice am I giving? Where do we begin with all this? What are the core considerations? So if you're at that point now where you've done some property, you've done some buy-to-lets or some flips, and you're really thinking that HMOs are for you, then kind of what I'm going to go through next are the key things to kind of ponder and work through. So the first thing for me, and this is always surprises me, is we have to be realistic about what resources we have available. So the first resource I'm talking about is finance. So like, what money do we have in the bank? We've got to be really realistic with HMOs. You're not going to create a decent HMO with 30k renovation. You're just not. I'm sorry. You might be able to do a buy-to-let with that, but HMOs, they need a lot more infrastructure creating. So therefore, they're going to take a lot more to create. So you need to be really, really realistic with what finances you've got. If you're sat there and you've got 50k in the bank, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen. Not for you on your own. It might happen if you can partner up with somebody, but you're not going to go out and create a 6-bed all-ensuite HMO with 50k in the bank. So really understanding what you need to be able to do that first one is so important, because they are cash and time intensive. So you need to be really, really realistic about that. And, when it comes to numbers and kind of forecasting, something that we now didn't back in the day, but definitely do now, is we worst case all the numbers. So we'll put in a slightly bigger build cost, looking to hopefully get some reductions in there, save on some contingency. We'll put, for example, vendor wants 200k. We won't put in 140 because it's unrealistic into the deal. We'll play at 200, we'll play at 180. No, this is what I would advise, and see where it really works for you and understand it, but be realistic as well, because that, whatever your kind of, whatever offers you're getting through are going to dictate your deposits and your stamp duty. So you've got to be really realistic about finance. And I'm not saying that you can't do it. You're just going to have to be creative of how you can go and do it. But, if you've got a couple of £100,000, for example, probably don't do a HMO in Knightsbridge, or try and do one. The finance available will also, to a degree, dictate the area that you can go into. The finance available will also dictate whether you can go into or out, or you should go out of Article 4. Now, Article 4, when it comes to HMOs, is like opening Pandora's box, and it's a subject that I'm really into because I live and breathe it all the time. So Article 4, basically, I'm just going to nutshell this in a simple way. Article 4 is it's a restriction that's put on certain parts, normally of city centres, which stops people rocking up and creating HMOs. It removes all rights, permitted development rights. So basically what that means is it's really hard to do HMOs in Article 4. Not impossible. That's another pod for another time, but really difficult. And if you do them, because the demand is so high and the supply is capped, really hard to add into, makes them more valuable. So to acquire an asset in an Article 4, you're paying more, basically, is what I'm getting to. You're paying more up front. So if you're thinking about going into an Article 4 area, then again, eyes wide open about what those purchase prices are going to be. If you're buying something that already has that planning in place, that C4 usage, you're going to pay more for the pleasure. So you will need more money in the bank to be able to do that. If you're, if that's going to be a factor into you moving into HMOs, then do consider going outside of Article 4, which is what I did. The 2 houses I told you about at the beginning that I rocked up on the same day and bought with my finger in the air, both outside Article 4, both still very much in operation now all these years later, and have performed really, really well. Both areas are due to Article 4 as well. So, I was able to go in and create those, a 4 and a 5 bed HMO under permitted development. And the purchase price of both of those buildings are, in comparison to an Article 4, are like, half. So what you need to put into it is a lot less. However, and there's always a caveat, isn't there? Because it sounds great, and I'm about to rain on your parade. What that does mean, and I don't want to get too technical right now, but just kind of ponder this if this is where you're at. You're probably going to be capped by a bricks and mortar valuation, a C3 valuation. So that means on the back end of the deal, so when you go to refinance after you've done your work, and if you've done buy-to-lets, you understand that process by now. You understand you have to do the work, you refinance out, you pull some money out, you move forward. So you get that, right? Because you're spending more to create a HMO, probably, you should be. On the refinance on the back end, you're pulling less out because you are capped by C3 valuation, bricks and mortar valuation. So outside of Article 4, that can be a big thing to consider. Very possible if you buy right, if you pick up the right non-Article 4 stock and you lean on your build cost, very, very possible. I've done it many times myself, but increasingly harder and harder. So again, you won't need so much cash pot as an Article 4 up front, but on the back end, you might leave more money in. So that's definitely something to kind of consider. Second resource that you should absolutely be factoring into this is time. Time, you've got to be realistic. They take longer to create. The infrastructure that you're putting into it is bigger. And I'm just right now talking specifically in and around the build. So creating the actual HMO, that takes a lot more of time, resource. So do you have that? Is that actually available? Can you be present? Because if you can't, then you're going to need a really, really good, competent, experienced build team, and potentially, a PM within the build team. So that's going to cost you more. So again, links back to the finance, right? So what you have available, you might need to put 15, 20% more in on top of that to pay for somebody to facilitate on time for you. Does it fit? Does it align? Also, kind of when you come out your build and it's in operation, if you are planning to self-manage, definitely that is going to be a time piece again, because you, by the nature of the beast, you've got multiple people in there. Therefore, finding those people, getting those people under, their ASTs sorted and referencing and the process, and then looking after them and communicating when they're in there, looking after your rents and reconciling and all that fun stuff. It's going to take more time. Do you have that? Is that what you want? Does that ultimately align with the type of property portfolio that you want to build? I'm just going to jump in and interrupt this episode because I have a really exciting announcement that I can't wait to share with you all. The doors are now open to be able to join my Redesigning the Property Industry mentoring program. I've been running my program since 2020, and I am so proud to say that in that time, I've supported and helped some seriously impressive people to start, grow and scale some of the best property businesses out there. If you're sat there and you're thinking, do you know, I would love to give property a go, but I just don't know where to start. Or you sat there and thinking, okay, I've started, but I'm really unsure about direction and where to go next. I absolutely hear you. Spaces to work with me are always very, very limited. Programme starts in July 2024. As part of the programme, you'll get to spend some one-to-one time with me monthly. You'll also become part of a very small and intimate group of people that are at a similar stage to you that can really help support, inspire and keep you on track and accountable. Every day you'll have access to me in your pocket, on Slack, in DMs and voice notes. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, then please don't hang about. Head to the link below, give the information a read, or drop me a DM on Insta, 3_BEESPACE. Let's do this. Let's build the property portfolio that you've always dreamed of together. I can be there to help and support you, guide you with all of my years' experience. So now let's get back to the episode. Really linking into time is location. So, banging on a massive drum that everyone's always used to me saying. Location is everything as a property developer. Don't care what your strategy is. Ultimately, as a property developer, you're in it for the long game, right? Like, where you're going to make long-term wealth is by holding decent assets in strong areas over a long period of time. If you're lucky, you'll make some cash flow off rent in the interim. But locations are the thing that encourages positive growth in equity within your buildings over a long period of time. So location, investment area is absolutely number one on the list for me every single time. Doesn't matter if it's HMOs, buy-to-lets, SAs, whatever it is. You've got to know that patch, that investment area, and you've got to live and breathe it. And then again, it links back into your time and resources, because it might be for you that, you're based in London and you've got a couple of $100,000, but that's not going to touch the sides. So you're going to look to go, or, up north somewhere, or you're going to go over to Kent, or, something like that. Or, and that means traveling. And that's going to eat into, you might be working full time. That's going to eat into that resource. So, does that really work for you? So, when you're thinking about your locations that you're picking for your HMOs, yes, obviously we need to think about, the core things about infrastructure and house prices and stuff, but also think about your time, your resource, how much of that can you actually give to travel to set these up, because they do take a lot. That first one, you are going to cut your teeth. You're going to get all the experience on that first one, and you're going to be up and down the motorway. And do you have that time available? Do you want to give it that time? And it's about time and money and headspace and lifestyle, and just finding that sweet spot, that location that kind of really, really, really ticks all those boxes. And really works for you, and kind of don't undervalue that. Don't just look at it and go, yeah, but in this area, I'm going to get this return on my investment, but it's 6 hours away from where I live. Because I have, over the years, had conversations, worked with many, many different investors that have been based in, primarily the south, and are looking to invest in the north, in Manchester, in Liverpool, in the northeast, and the travelling from Brighton up into the northeast, and it's just inevitably in the end, it's just made the experience not a lot of fun, basically, because they're saving on money to a degree because the house prices are cheaper, but their exchange is just exhausting in terms of like travel and time. So when you're picking that location that you're going to do it in, if you're going to be remote, don't underplay that part. Really be conscious about, your own time available. If you're like me and you're lucky that you live very close to where you invest. So I'm Nottingham born and raised. I invest in Nottingham. From where I live, it's probably 20-25 minutes tops for me to get there. We're just lucky. We're just lucky that Nottingham's one of those cities that you can do that in, So we've just leaned into that massively, and that's absolutely worked for us. We've got a really, really 66,000 students in the city centre, I believe, at the last count, across the two unis. So we've got really, really high student numbers. We've got really key affluent non-Article 4 areas, and house prices pretty okay. They're not not Manchester or Birmingham. So it's doable. It's very, very doable for us here in Nottingham. So, and that's another point to say, that if you are in one of those cities, that really look in your own city first and see if you can see that opportunity. You know, as I kind of alluded to there, our priority at the moment is really building out those student rooms in the city centre, because we like that business model. But, you know, thinking about your HMOs, you've got options. You know, we started out focusing in on the really high-end professional let. So for me, my entire business model is really focusing on delivering a product in that top 5% of the market. That just sits right with me. That's how I want my portfolio to be. That's the product that I love to create, and yeah, that works for me. But there are other options out there. So fundamentally, if you're HMOs, you know, you're looking at your students, you're looking at your professionals, young professionals, and you also have the option of, you know, thinking about your supported living as well. Which for a lot of people that go into supported living, and I'm no expert in this, guys, but I've got quite a few successful connections within that part of the industry. They do that because it really aligns with their value set, and I get that 100%. So, you know, you see more and more of that product coming forward on the HMO side, and there's so many benefits in terms of, you know, if you're doing it for the right reasons, you're delivering a really, really good, well-considered product to somebody that may be in need to some degree. I don't want to say vulnerable, because I know there's lots of different avenues to supported living. But yeah, you know, you can almost, you're giving back to another level, I think, when you're creating those spaces. So that really works for some people. And if you're drawn to that and that feels really, really right to you, then definitely look into that more and more, because from what I hear, the demand is growing all of the time for that, you know, level of accommodation that's really well considered and in the right location. For us personally, on the student side, the reason why I like that model is I like to see my contracts, you know, a year in advance. That feels nice as a business model. So, you know, we go out for letting season in October, we're full by Christmas for the following July and August. And then, yeah, we keep rolling. So we're always kind of a year ahead in terms of predicting cash flow. And I like that. That works. You know, your professionals to a degree are similar, because ours are all on, you know, 6-month periodic contracts. God, I hope I've got that right. Otherwise, I'll be in a lot of trouble with Eli. And generally, I would say, in terms of our professionals leaving us, I think average churn probably would be between 18 to 24 months. So in that regard, they're sticking around a lot longer for the students. But yeah, because we've got quite a few professional houses, it feels slightly more like there's more movement in there. And also on the student side for us, you know, if we get a group, they all sit under one AST. So there's a lot of benefits to that, which I won't go into too much detail right now. Whereas on the professional side, it's separate ASTs. So a bit more involved on the management and like kind of the responsibility of the building and stuff like that. I've got both, honestly, in my portfolio, and both have worked really well. I think for me to now look at professional lets, I would only consider them in really affluent near city centre areas where I know that there would be a demand for that. It's not a focus that we've got at the moment. However, like I said, when I was starting out, absolutely, it's such a strong entry like part to the market if there's a gap. So like, you know, really starting to look at that investment area and then really thinking about the type of tenant that you potentially would like to serve is, you know, where we should really be thinking, where we should be starting, you know, and kind of once we do that, we need to really look at the opportunity that could be in that area. So what does the saturation look like, for example? So I mentioned before, so Notts has got 66,000 students. Like, look, I know there's demand for my product in the city centre, so that's all good. And there's a lot of people doing it. Yeah, of course, a lot of PBSA shooting up, but the numbers tell me that I can fill the rooms. So for you, if you're starting out and you're looking at your area, you've got to really look at, okay, what does the competition look like here? Who's already in this patch? Who's already operating in this area? We're looking at, you can go to spare room. That'll just give you that information pretty much accurately. We can see, okay, right, this is, what's currently available. This is like what they're charging, and this is the standard that's being offered. So how can I, in this market, add value, create a product that's going to stand out, that's going to work, that's going to be, the room's going to fly off the shelf. How can I do that? What's my USP? And don't for 1 minute think that you can go into a saturated area. This is a great tip, with a really well designed product, and you'll supersede everybody, because you just won't. And I know this through my network in a city that's very close to me, is that it currently doesn't have an Article 4, and everybody's gone there, flocked there to go to do the HMOs, and now it's so highly saturated that what they're inevitably doing is, there's a lot of empty rooms, so they're slicing the room rates. So they're basically bottoming, slashing their own market. There's no kind of healthy competition there. Then the tenants are just moving around. A new one's done, I'll go in that one now, and it's cheaper. Where does that end? You don't want to be chasing your tail in that market. So if it feels really saturated, then that is a yellow flag for me. So really, be conscious about that. Another consideration, which is so essential to bake into the mix of making your decisions, is really understanding what a good deal looks like. And the only way to be able to do that is to understand the market that you want to go and invest into. So, like I mentioned before, if we're looking outside Article 4, and we're looking at bricks and mortar C3 valuations, we need to really understand those street by street level, and absolutely get our evidence together. We don't do what I did back in the day, put your finger in the air and hope for the best, because that might work. But if you're serious about building a proper business that's going to stand the test of time, then you need to get lean on deal analysis, and you have to understand valuations and the risk attached. When we're looking at what something's going to be worth, it's done on comparables. A surveyor's going to turn up, whether your bricks and mortar valuation or your commercial valuation, they're going to turn up and they're going to look round, measure up, look at the finish, ask some questions, potentially look to see your ASTs, and then they're going to go away and look for comparables next door. They're going to look for comparables across the street. They're going to do their own due diligence, so beat them to it. Really look and understand what you're hedging your bets against, and get those comparables together. It's so, so, so important. And never, ever over-egg the numbers. Like I mentioned before, we, very risk averse, so we'll always kind of make worst case scenario. And then if something's worst case scenario and it still works, you're good to go. But you've got to have the evidence. And this is at every level. It's not just doing your first HMO. It's for us now, looking at buildings that are going to be GDV of 3 million, we've got to have the rock solid concrete evidence, put our hand on our hearts and say, yep, there it is. And and this is just best practice, key principle for anybody. Understand that end valuation that you're gearing towards, and you do that by comparables. So, as an example, you're going to take a mid-terrace, you're going to take it 5-bed HMO on a bricks and mortar valuation, right? What I need to understand is, let's assume on the HMO you've turned the front room into a bedroom. Forget that, that's still a living room as far as the valuation's concerned. So what does we've created a 5-bed on paper, but a 4-bed in terms of the surveyor's eyes. What does that value? Have we got one next door? Have we got one across the road? Or we've got this street here. Okay, and there's these results. And then the second layer to this is that, and this is a must, go to where you're investing and really, really check it out. Check out the streets, because we all know one street compared to the one just down the road can be so different. And I can tell when I'm working with a mentee and we're looking at comparables, and I can say, that area there that you're showing me through these numbers, a bit dodgier, isn't it? And they're like, yeah, it's got X, Y, and Z. I can tell that through the numbers straight away. I've got the instinct, I've got the knowledge. So, really understanding those end valuations and having those concrete evidence is so important. And really just be realistic. Be realistic about your numbers. Understand your build costs, ask the questions, be surrounded by the right people that can advise and support you. That's really, really key. But in essence, if you're there and you are that person that's just about to make that shift into HMOs, then do it. If you've got all your ducks in the row, you've considered everything that I've kind of just gone over, what's stopping you? Be completely realistic and have your eyes wide open. And like I said, like I'll be real with you here. The first one is tough. I told you about mine, gazumping myself. Great one. Please don't do that. Listen to me and don't do that. The first one is tough, but hopefully everything that I've kind of covered in this pod can help you. But listen, reach out to me. 3_BEESPACE on Instagram. Let's connect. Let me follow your HMO journey. Tell me you've listened to the pod, and we can have a chat about it and what you're going to do. And yeah, best of luck and go you. That's a wrap for another episode of the BEESPACE Podcast. I've been your host, Jade McNeil, property developer, mentor, and business coach. Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite platforms. And until next time, remember, don't believe the hype and always keep it real.